Welcome to this week's Herman Tiu Laurel edition of Talk News TV and Politics Today. And as we do every week and in every episode, we discuss burning issues of the day. Not just burning issues, but issues of life and death for our nation. And often we hear of all these problems in our society, and very often again we hear certain sectors blame government institutions. They blame government institutions for its corruption and say that that is the cause of all these problems, and therefore privatize. What has been our national experience with privatization? Have you been happy with the privatization of power, the privatization of water? Have they delivered on the promises of these privatizations of lower prices, better competition, better service? Now, with this new administration came another lambasting of a government, an old government institution. That is the National Food Authority. They blame the NFA for many ills, and they say NFA has been an instrument for over-importation, it is ridden with corruption, it is the reason why rice prices are very high, it is one reason why there is hunger in the country. In the past 2 weeks, we have read the recent surveys on hunger, and that the March 2011 hunger rating has increased almost 70% over the 12-year average of around 13.5% to around 20.5%. And just this day, while waiting for our program to start, I downloaded this latest news from the internet. Aquino warned of rice crisis, and this is from the National Intelligence Coordinating Agency, which says soaring prices of cereals, which includes rice, due to production shortfalls led to food riots in several countries and toppled the government in 2008, while prompting the Philippines to buy huge volumes of rice, which it sold to the poor at a discount, and so on and so forth. But essentially, it talks about the food crisis that is looming on the horizon. And this is not just, of course, the Philippines. It is a worldwide phenomenon today. At the same time, some of our bloggers emailed me an observation. And again, you will see here, can we focus on this? Two quotations from two cabinet members of the present government. First on top is from Agriculture Secretary Alcala, made on April 7, 2011. Quote, "We will not be importing additional rice for 2011. Harvest is good," unquote. However, just 4 days later, on April 11, 2011, National Food Authority Administrator Angelito Manayo says, quote, "The Philippines will import an additional 300,000 metric tons of rice to prevent a shortage in the latter part of the year." So, we are seeing a confused state of affairs. And in the midst of this, they say they want to privatize NFA. They in fact threatened to reduce NFA budget to zero at one time. And they say it is no longer necessary because they blame NFA for corruption, for the over-importation. So the question is, what are the facts? In fact, one very important point I'm sure our guests will report this, is figures being used by Butch Abad. I will ask our guests to focus on that also later. Just to paint a government institution in the worst light, Treasury Secretary Butch Abad presents distorted figures. Okay, so that is an introduction to the very, very significant and very grave issue of the rice situation in the country and the impact that NFA privatization will have. In fact, our theme for this evening is NFA privatization equals food crisis. Here to present the view of the veterans among the workers in the National Food Authority to present to you the facts that mainstream media has failed to present to you. Mainstream media, which seems to be collaborating with those who want to destroy NFA, as they have destroyed the National Power Corporation, as they have destroyed the MWSS, as they have destroyed the price structure in the tollways fees, and so on. You know? Here with us is the National Food Authority Employees Association, led by Mr. Roman Sanchez, the president of the NFAEA. He's the national president. He's the one in red you'll see later. Roman Sanchez, no?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And then the NFAEA vice president and spokesperson of KPMM, Mr. Larry Tan, and the rose among the grains, Marlene Cui, first vice chair, collective negotiations agreement of the NFA also, Employees Association.
Yes, sir.
So we'll ask the president to kick off the presentation of the NFA Employees Association. Roman, take it away. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you very much, Sir Herman, and to all listeners and viewers of GNN. I'm Roman Sanchez, representing the National Food Authority Employees Association, and also the national president of the National Federation of Employees Association of the Department of Agriculture, and a convener of the Solidarity to Stop Privatization. So we're here tonight to explain to the public what's happening at NFA, bakit ito pinaprivatize, who are behind the NFA privatization, and we would like also to explain to the public why the privatization of NFA is equals to the rice deregulation law that they would like to be passed is equals to oil deregulation law. We have experienced yung hagupit and the all ills and negative effects of the oil deregulation law, and that would be experienced sooner or later if privatization of NFA will be completed. We'd like to explain what is the National Food Authority, what's its mandate, what's key function, how does it stabilize the price and supply of rice in the market and in the farm gate, and what's food security, what's buffer stock. First, our charter commands the government under a law to have a twin mandate, which means food security and price stabilization of supply and price stabilization of rice. And this can only be performed with the four key functions, which means buffer stocking. And buffer stocking could only be done if we conduct rice distribution and rice procurement, because rice is a biological organism and that breathes and needs nourishment. Therefore, it should be replenished through rice distribution, and it should be replenished through procurement of palay from the farmers. If it is inadequate, we have to source somewhere else. And in order to be effective, there is a regulatory functions, key function, which is the regulatory function. We issue rules and regulation to maintain order in the rice industry. We enforce the rice laws, and we issue standards in terms of weight, in terms of container, in terms of price tags, things like that. So for 38 years, we're doing this, and I'm glad to inform the public that the 38 years of existence of the National Food Authority, most of these years is a stable price and supply of rice, except of course in 1995, wherein the NFA was converted into a service corporation, wherein the NFA was subjected to not to procure rice and not to distribute rice to the public, because of an ADB loan conditionality. And then, but this was arrested after a year. Of course, this left the government 1.6 days buffer stock during the time. That's why there was
which is
instability in the market.
1.6 days?
1.6 days instead of 30 days.
That's right, yeah.
Starting July 1 of every year. And then the next scenario was, the next problem was during 2008, wherein the government has enough buffer stocks. However, because of the oil crisis during the time, and production problems in rice exporting countries like Thailand and India during the time wherein they imposed export ban to the rice. Rice was limited and rice was so costly. And during the time, the private sector was given an allocation of 753,000 metric tons, but they failed to bring it in. That contributed to the rice spikes and price surges of the cost of rice.
I remember,
aside from it is oil driven.
Between 95 and 97, there was a rice pila. What year was that? Do you recall?
2008.
This
2008.
But there was one during that time of Ramos.
Yeah, that was 1995.
That was 95.
But 1995 is not an oil-driven scenario. It is practically because government only maintained 1.6 days of buffer stock.
Yeah, I remember the slogan of Ramos and Sebastian at that time was
yes.
high-value crops. Itong mga rice, low class ito. That resulted in the rice.
The prioritization of planting cash crops.
That's right. Yeah.
And rice production, rice agriculture was set aside.
Okay, one question before you go on. I often, or I sometimes hear people say, ang NFA naman walang epekto sa market kasi 1% lang ang binibili nila of the total market or rice supply. Is that true? How much does NFA really buy?
So I would like to explain that stabilization mandate of the National Food Authority are two things. In the retail market or the consumer market and in the farm gate. In the retail market, our average participation ranges from 4 to as high as 30%. Market injection, market participation, we call it. And in the farm gate, we range from 1 to 5%. One as low as 1 and as high as 5%.
And that's sufficient
of the total harvest
to affect the price and supply in the market?
I think so, but what we experience, for example, at the farm gate, the delay in budget affects the effectiveness and efficiency of procuring palay as the buffer stock. And unfortunately, the government for the last 2 decades prioritized importation instead of palay procurement. In fact, our records will show that only 20% of the budget for buffer stocking is allotted for local procurement and 80% is allotted towards rice importation.
So that was at the tail end.
It is actually a violation of the NFA charter.
So that's about the tail end of the Cory Aquino administration up to the present, past 20 years. Because
yes, sir.
The what I call the yellow regime has been there for 25 years.
1990.
What about the time of ERAP? Was there a difference in the policy and direction and the amounts of budgets and prioritization?
There was a time that during the time of ERAP, our procurement reached as much as 4%. Procurement of palay.
This is farm gate. This is
farm gate. Farm gate.
So that's high.
That's already high.
That's already high.
That's already high. If you are producing like for example 16 million metric tons, 4% is 60. That's 640,000 metric tons. That's a big volume.
That's significant. Okay.
Yes, that's significant. But then, if I continue, this particular policy, instead of giving more emphasis of procuring palay, instead bigger volume in procuring palay compared to bigger volume in procuring imported rice, this policy has something to do with the loan conditionalities from multilateral financial institutions
the
like
multilateral
IMF, World Bank, and ADB,
And
which
this-
will be explained by Larry
Are,
later
are
on.
we very dependent? Do we really have to be dependent on these loans? Any reaction from anyone?
Actually, the dependence of the government from the multilateral loans is coming from the Department of Finance.
So that's a policy decision.
Yes,
It
it's a
could be
policy
otherwise. It could be different.
Yes,
If
yes,
we have a
yes.
government that has a different attitude.
Correct.
Okay.
But if we follow the NFA mandate,
Okay.
the NFA mandate says that importation should only be done as the last recourse, which means you have to exhaust all your resources in order to beef up your buffer stock through procuring palay.
Now, before we go to Larry, they say that if we don't have importation, if we don't prioritize it, prices will go up domestically.
Well, of course, if you don't buy palay from the farmers, I mean enough buffer stock. Our role here is to maintain enough buffer stock from January to June at a rate of 15 days.
Okay.
Buffer
stock.
Your buffer stock in 24/7 should always be ready for 15 days.
Okay.
15 days from the government, 15 days from the traders, 15 days from the household.
Okay.
And then when comes July 1 of every year, the government should maintain 30 days. 30 days buffer stock, 30 days from the household, and 30 days from the traders.
We're about to go into our break. So, what would you like Larry to explain? You were saying earlier.
Larry will explain the issue on policies on privatization and why the Philippine is import dependent for the last 20 years, so that the public would know that the government itself is the one who is not following what's written in the charter, what's written in the law, and even in the Magna Carta of small farmers.
Okay, let's go to Larry. Larry, we have 2 minutes before the break, and then we'll carry it over to the second part. Go ahead.
First of all, before I start, I would like to thank Sir Herman for giving us the opportunity
You have to remove the sir. We're comrades
to be
here.
a guest here in your GNN TV. As union officers, we believe that it is incumbent upon us to strongly oppose the privatization and abolition of our agency. And I would like to explain here, Mentong, that
can we focus on that? Yeah, show it to the camera while we're...
since 1980 up to 2011. In 1980 alone, mayroong mga structural adjustment program na dikta sa atin ng US imperialist multilateral financial institutions led by ADB, World Bank, USA, and the rest. Here, one of the dictates in phasing out of price controls for farm inputs and inputs.
Including fertilizer, the very
Yes.
vital fertilizers.
Withdrawal of subsidies in farm inputs such as fertilizer. In 1983, there was a US $300 million loan from the World Bank. Allow the exportation of rice and corn by the private sector, the dismantling of price control on rice and corn. And in 1985, there was a PL 480 loan conditionality which triggered the issuance of Executive Order 1028.
Okay.
Now, what is 1028?
Larry, we'll continue with that in the second half of our program. Okay, let's take our break.